I like to think that I'm a reasonable person. I'm also aware that I haven't always been reasonable in the past. For example, my Everything is Person-to-Person series. I've looked back on that series and I really like the base message, but then I watch one, like my Person-to-Person on feminism, and I'm like, yeah, okay, the video's got the right idea, but what the heck was I thinking there? There's a bunch of little stuff like that all over my channel, but none so protruding as my opinions and views on Apple. I look back on some thoughts I had in the past and think similarly to my person-to-person content. The fundamentals are there, I like what I'm conveying, but how I did so isn't exactly on par anymore. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying my views on Apple have changed that drastically. I feel like there's a bit of a split in mentality depending on a few factors regarding the company. Mine went a little something like this. Boy gets 4th gen iPod Touch, then iPhone 5 because it was familiar. Then he learns about tech and realizes if he wants power and control, he can't stick with Apple. As time went further on, he saw how scummy and crappy Apple was to its consumers, making them spend a couple $1,000s just for a name instead of an actual product. The reason it pissed me off so much was because I don't like being cheated. I don't like seeing people get cheated, and to watch it happen to the scale it does makes me think brainwashing is not only possible, but Apple has successfully achieved it. Was it all Apple's fault? Did capitalist America lay a breeding ground for this very thing? Sure, but I can't help but look at some of Apple's products and think differently than I have before. I used to say things like, Apple makes their tech out of aluminum and plastic, which I look back on now and think, duh? Those are pretty standard materials, Barry. I get my point. Most companies use similar materials and don't sell them for facetious prices, but I used to go a bit overboard with my ideas, hoping that they would change someone's mind instead of just being real and letting the person watch the video make up their own. So I want to do that this time. Alright Barry, why not start with why you hate them? This is the part that's going to be a bit annoying to discuss, and I promise I'm not trying to make anyone who buys Apple products sound stupid. If you have your reasons, you have your reasons. There have been many times when someone has had an Apple device and demonstrated to me why it was the best decision for what they were using it for. That being said, Apple markets to the lowest common denominator, to the least mindful people. It rakes them in, locks them down, and the people are trapped in this ecosystem they don't even realize what's happened to them. What I mean by this is Apple's had a history. It's gained people's trust and has been through a lot of changes. This company has sparked a ton of wild innovations, and the technology was diligently designed and optimized for the consumer. People learned to trust Apple, and I myself had a tech crush on them too. Time goes on, and people who bought themselves an iPhone now realize that the MacBook will synergize with their phone. Pick that up. The Apple Watch would synergize with both. Now I have that. They begin to force out innovations that start to give their consumers less options, and then they call it freedom. This is where people like me back the hell out. You don't get to tell me one thing and then do another. More power and control in the consumer's hands. We want the consumer to decide. Also, we remove the headphone jack. You don't get a choice in that. $1,000 for the same phone and $300 just for added storage, which we don't allow you to expand yourself. If you buy a computer and want to upgrade that thing, guess what? And I'm not saying these things aren't done by other companies. They absolutely are. Sometimes even first. The issue I have is Apple coming in, taking an idea from somewhere, calling it their innovation, claiming it offers more options to the consumer, and people don't think for half a second. They just allow that to be the truth for them. Perhaps it's not Apple I'm upset at. I like to imagine that people are mindful and think before they make decisions. I mean, we had to be that way when we were working our way up the food chain, did we not? Make the wrong move and that's your life. These Apple consumers would have just been born to die if we went back a few hundred years, and maybe I'm upset at the decline in awareness more so than the transparently childlike manipulation tactics that Apple uses. When it comes to their products, I like them. They're shiny and they do have some really good ideas. A tablet with a 120Hz screen, there's no reason to make a tablet without that anymore. That's just a good idea, and Apple's been the only company that I've seen to do that. This display, their new Extreme Dynamic Resolution display, is one of the most mouth-watering displays I've ever seen. The technology in this thing is unmatched. 6K, a brightness with a peak of 1600 nits, a 10-bit panel, 60Hz display. I mean, I could ask for more, but the technology isn't there yet. This monitor is an editor's dream, and Apple made it. What the hell? But you don't think for a second, you'd be forgetting about the most asinine aspect. Seriously, Apple? You can't keep your hand out of anyone's pants? Can't just make a product, can you, Apple? No, you gotta milk the consumer another $1,000 over a piece of metal. So either I'm gonna buy a 3D printer and make a base, or no, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna buy a 3D printer with the money I would have wasted on this piece of shit and make my own stand. Friggin' idiots, and forgive me when crap like this gets on my nerves. Maybe if the general consumer was a little smarter, we wouldn't be in situations where companies could take advantage like this. I mean, Apple's not the only one. Samsung is the Android equivalent, and though they do use the operating system I like, it doesn't mean they're any better. I feel like the whole point of Android was to be able to connect everything you own together. You're still involved in an ecosystem, but it's not locked down like Apple's is. I can buy any headset I want, any smartwatch I choose, any earbuds, tablets, Bluetooth speakers, microphones, and I don't have to wonder if it'll work with my phone. Then you have Samsung, who makes wonderful products that I'd seriously consider, except for the fact that I didn't buy a Samsung phone, so I'm restricted from some super neat features. Samsung has a list of phones that their watch would work with, and if your phone isn't there, well, that sucks. Even if your phone is on this list, you can run into some compatibility issues. You have to install certain plugins and apps to make it work properly, and all Samsung had to do was not do that. It's Android. Everything automatically works until you design it not to. And you'll always have someone screaming out, well, you just don't get it. They have to restrict blah blah or else it won't work properly. Yeah, that's why when I purchase all my Android devices from third parties, it all works like a charm. Weird, isn't it? So you're trying to tell me that all these companies that have zero affiliation with each other are somehow connecting their products together better than Apple and Samsung can? Or maybe, yeah, not worth explaining for a third time. Now, I do want to say that there are a lot of things that I like about Apple and Samsung. They are innovative, they do think outside the box, and that's exactly why when I look at their products, I imagine myself purchasing one. To me, though, it's not worth giving up my freedom to choose which specific companies I want to buy from. I don't want to have to lock myself down to Samsung because I like their watch, or Apple because I like their phone. I feel like I'm intentionally buying into a manipulation system that's so clearly money-driven over consumer choice. I want to talk about tipping culture in America for a second. I feel like it'd be a good analogy. In Vietnam, there's no such thing as tipping. It makes no sense to give more money for something than the thing is worth. In the UK, tipping is a convenience. You buy a candy bar, you have 20p left, so you tell the cashier to keep the change instead of having to carry it around and try to use it later. In America, we have a very money-driven system. Not only is tipping expected, but you have to give specific percentages based on the price of your meal, and that's just dumb. Why do I owe anyone money for doing nothing? And I mean the waiters and waitresses can literally do nothing. Give a blank face, bare minimum, no communication and effort, and you're still rude if you don't tip. Now, I tell a lot of Americans my views on tipping and they get pissed. Work in food service and you'll understand, and I absolutely grant that. But it demonstrates to me just how broken things can get without people even being aware to it. Making excuses for something that when you leave the States and try to explain to people from other countries, they sit there and laugh at Americans for being so stupid as to throw hard-earned money at nothing, simply because the establishment won't pay their employees enough. Now, I'm not trying to say that Apple treats their employees poorly. I've heard some stories, but I can't confirm. The point is the mentality. Normal doesn't exist. There's only what's happening now, and if you want to change normal, you have to be an example of that. Say out loud what you want. Don't be expecting that change to happen, but make your own damn decisions. Don't let some loudmouth opinionated BulletBarry YouTuber tell you how to think. And don't let Apple or tipping culture or any other social norms tell you what right and wrong is. If you like Apple, then you like Apple, and I can absolutely understand why. If you like to give a glorious tip after your meal, then more power to you. I feel like I finally understand what it is to be an Apple hater. And it's funny, I only learned that when I wasn't one anymore. It's cool to see technology advance so fast, and to live in an era where we can be so choosy is nice. Technology is moving so quickly. Keeping up with all these innovations is going to get real tricky real fast. Regardless as to whether or not you like the company or not, if you stay up to date, well, I guess that's technically an Apple Watch.